The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any civilization in known space. It floated at the heart of Nexus Prime, a station world that served as the political center of 847 spacefaring species. The chamber itself could hold representatives from every member world, and on this particular day, it was completely full. High Arbiter Zethkal of the Vorathi hegemony stood at the central podium. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms that he used expressively when he spoke. His species had dominated galactic politics for 3,000 years, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Fellow members of the council," he began, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the massive room, "we gather today to address a growing threat to galactic stability. I speak, of course, of the species known as humans." A murmur rippled through the assembled representatives. Everyone knew why they were here. The humans had been the topic of worried conversations for decades now. 47 standard years ago, humanity emerged from their home system, Zethkal continued. At that time, they possessed only basic faster-than-light technology. We welcomed them into the galactic community as we welcome all new species. We offered them trade, knowledge, and a place among civilized peoples. He paused for effect, letting his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of disappointment. And how have they repaid our generosity? They have expanded into 17 star systems. They have built shipyards capable of producing vessels at 3 times the rate of any other species. Their population has grown from 8 billion to over 50 billion. They have refused to share their technological advances with the Council as required by treaty. In the human delegation section, Ambassador Helena Vance sat quietly and listened. She was a woman in her early 50s, with silver hair cut short and eyes that revealed nothing of what she was thinking. 2 junior diplomats sat beside her, but she had instructed them to remain silent no matter what happened. "The humans claim these are internal matters," Zethkal said with obvious contempt. "They claim the right to develop as they see fit. But we have seen this pattern before. A young species rises quickly, grows arrogant, and eventually threatens the peace we have maintained for 12,000 years. Representative Crix of the Molthari Collective rose from his seat. He was an insect-like being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights. "High Arbiter, what exactly do you propose? Surely you are not suggesting military action against a sovereign species." Zethkal smiled, which on a Vorathi face looked more like a threat display. "I propose something far more reasonable. I propose that we issue humanity an ultimatum. They will halt all colonial expansion immediately. They will surrender their military fleet to Council supervision. They will accept monitored development status for a period of no less than 500 standard years." The chamber erupted in noise. Some representatives shouted approval, others called out objections. Ambassador Vance remained perfectly still. "And if they refuse?" asked Representative Yenny of the Solarith Union. Her people were one of the few species who had maintained friendly relations with humanity. "What then?" "Then the combined galactic fleet will take corrective action," Zethkal replied. "We have 4 million warships at our disposal. Humanity has perhaps 50,000. The mathematics are simple." Ambassador Vance pressed the button on her console that requested permission to speak. A light appeared on the central display, showing that the human delegation wished to address the council. Zethkal glanced at the light and then looked away. "I move that we proceed directly to a vote on my proposal. Under Section 447 of Council Procedures, debate may be limited in matters of urgent security concern." "Seconded," called out 3 voices at once. Representative Yenny stood again. "This is outrageous. The accused party must be allowed to speak in their own defense. This is a fundamental principle of justice." "The motion has been made and seconded," Zethkal said smoothly. "All in favor of limiting debate and proceeding to an immediate vote?" Lights flickered across the chamber as representatives registered their votes. The result appeared on the central display within seconds. 712 in favor, 135 opposed. Ambassador Vance's request to speak was denied. "The motion carries," Zethkal announced with obvious satisfaction. "Now, all in favor of issuing the ultimatum to humanity as I have described?" Again the lights flickered. Again the result appeared quickly. 689 in favor, 158 opposed. The motion carries, Zethkal declared. Humanity will be informed of our decision immediately. They will have 30 standard rotations to comply. If they fail to do so, the combined galactic fleet will enforce our will. He turned to look directly at Ambassador Vance. Does the human representative wish to make any statement for the record? Now Vance stood. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She was a small figure compared to most of the alien species present, but something in her posture commanded attention. I request permission to address the council, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. Permission denied, Zethkal replied. You may make a brief statement for the record. Nothing more. Vance nodded slowly. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. Some looked away. Others stared back with hostility or curiosity or something that might have been fear. Very well, she said. I will relay your terms to Earth, and Earth will respond. She gathered her materials and gestured to her junior diplomats. Together, the three humans walked toward the chamber exit. The massive doors opened automatically as they approached. Vance paused at the threshold and turned back one final time. I would advise all of you to spend the next 30 rotations with your families. Tell them you love them. Make peace with whatever gods you worship. Then she was gone, and the doors closed behind her. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then nervous laughter broke out among several delegations. Zethkal himself chuckled and shook his head. Human arrogance, he said. They have always believed themselves special. They will learn otherwise soon enough. The representatives began to file out of the chamber, congratulating each other on handling the human problem so decisively. After thousands of years of galactic peace, they had grown comfortable with their power. They had forgotten what it felt like to face a truly dangerous enemy. In the docking bay, Ambassador Vance boarded her shuttle without speaking. Her junior diplomats exchanged worried glances, but knew better than to ask questions. The shuttle lifted off and passed through the station's atmospheric barrier into open space. Ambassador, one of the young diplomats finally said, what happens now? Will Earth really surrender? Vance looked out the viewport at the stars. Earth will not surrender, she said quietly. Earth has never surrendered to anyone in all of human history, and we certainly will not start now. But the combined fleet has 4 million ships, the diplomat pressed. How can we possibly fight against those odds? Vance smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You assume that the fleet they know about is all we have. You assume that we have been honest with them about our capabilities? The diplomat's eyes widened. You mean... I mean that humanity learned a long time ago that the galaxy is not a friendly place, Vance said. I mean that we have been preparing for this moment for 40 years. I mean that the Galactic Council has just made the worst mistake in its 12,000-year history. She turned to look at her staff. Send the signal. Authorization code Prometheus 7. Tell Admiral Chen that the Council has chosen war, and tell him that Earth's response is approved. The shuttle accelerated toward the edge of the system, where a human vessel waited to take them home. Behind them, Nexus Prime continued its slow rotation, its inhabitants celebrating their victory over the upstart humans. None of them noticed that every communication buoy in the system had gone dark. None of them realized that they had been completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. None of them understood that the countdown to their destruction had already begun. In the Grand Chamber, Zethkal hosted a celebration dinner for his closest allies. They raised glasses of expensive wine and toasted the future of the Galactic Council. To peace, Zethkal declared, to stability, and to putting humanity in their proper place. The other representatives echoed his toast and drank deeply. They had no way of knowing that far across the galaxy, signals were racing between hidden stations and secret fleets. They had no way of knowing that humanity's true military power had never been revealed to anyone. They had no way of knowing that in just 72 hours, their entire civilization would be brought to its knees. Ambassador Vance's shuttle reached the waiting human cruiser and docked smoothly. As she stepped aboard, the captain saluted her. Welcome back, Ambassador. We received your signal. The Admiral has been informed. Vance nodded. Good. Take us home, Captain. I have a war-to-help plan. The cruiser's engines came to life, and the ship vanished into faster-than-light travel. Behind it, The Galactic Council continued its celebration, completely unaware that its days of power were already numbered. In the darkness between stars, humanity's true fleet began to move. The first reports of communication failures arrived 12 hours after the council vote. A tradeship captain complained that he could not reach his home port. A diplomat reported that her messages to her government were not going through. A military commander discovered that his secure channel to fleet headquarters had gone silent. At first, nobody connected these isolated incidents. The galactic communication network was vast and complex. Minor failures happened all the time. Technicians were dispatched to check relay stations and repair damaged equipment, but the failures kept spreading. On the Vorthai homeworld, High Commander Dreth stood in the Military Operations Center and watched his display screens go dark one by one. His staff worked frantically at their consoles, trying to restore connections that kept disappearing. "What is happening?" he demanded. "I need to communicate with our fleet commanders." "We're trying, sir," a young officer replied, "but every time we establish a connection, it fails within seconds. It's like something is actively blocking us." Dreth felt a cold sensation spreading through his body. He had been in the military for 200 years. He had fought in 3 wars and commanded millions of soldiers. He knew what this looked like. "This is not a malfunction," he said slowly. "This is an attack." The officer looked at him with confusion. "An attack? But who would attack our communications? The only species we're in conflict with is humanity, and they don't have the technology to—" He stopped speaking as the implications became clear. Dreth grabbed a communication device and tried to contact High Arbiter Zethkal on Nexus Prime. The connection failed. He tried 3 more times with the same result. "Get me a ship," he ordered. "I need to reach the council in person, and tell our fleet commanders, through whatever means necessary, to begin emergency mobilization." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Military leaders discovered they had lost contact with their forces. Government officials found themselves cut off from their colonies. Merchants realized they had no way to track their cargo ships. The panic began slowly, but grew with every passing hour. On Nexus Prime, Zethkal received report after report of communication failures. He sat in his private office and listened as his advisors described the spreading chaos. "We cannot reach 80% of our member worlds," one advisor said. "Our military command network is completely compromised. Every transmission we send is being intercepted and decoded in real time." "That's impossible," Zethkal insisted. "Our encryption protocols are the most advanced in the galaxy. No species has the computing power to break them." "Nevertheless, it is happening," the advisor replied. "We have confirmed it through multiple independent sources. Someone is reading every message we send, and they are doing it instantly." Another advisor stepped forward. "There's more, High Arbiter. Our intelligence services report that all human vessels have vanished from known shipping lanes. Every human colony has gone dark. We have no information about human fleet movements or military preparations." Zethkal stood up abruptly. "Find them. Send scout ships to their colonies. I want to know where their fleet is and what they are doing." "We have tried, sir. The scout ships either return with no data or they don't return at all. It's as if the humans have simply disappeared." For the first time in his long political career, Zethkal felt genuine fear. He had expected humanity to respond to the ultimatum with negotiation, perhaps with limited resistance. He had not expected this. "Contact the combined fleet," he ordered. "Tell them to mobilize immediately. We are not waiting 30 rotations. We strike now, before the humans can prepare." His advisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. "High Arbiter, our communication with the fleet is also compromised. We cannot send secure orders to our commanders." "Then send unsecure orders. Use couriers. Use messenger drones. I don't care how you do it. Just get the fleet moving." The advisors hurried to obey, but Zethkal could see the doubt in their eyes. They were beginning to understand what he already suspected. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. 48 hours after the council vote, the situation had become critical. Trade across the galaxy had ground to a halt. Military forces sat idle because they could not receive orders. Governments struggled to maintain control as their citizens demanded answers. And then the message arrived. It appeared on every display screen on Nexus Prime simultaneously. It bypassed every security system and every firewall. It simply appeared as if by magic. The message was short. It said, "Your ultimatum has been received. Our response follows." Below the text was a countdown timer. 47 hours remained. Zethkal stared at the timer and felt his heart racing. He gathered his advisors and the remaining council members for an emergency meeting. "We must assume the humans are planning a military strike," he said. "We need to get the combined fleet to Nexus Prime for defense." "The fleet commanders report navigation problems," an advisor replied. "Their systems are producing corrupted data. They cannot plot accurate courses to our location. Then they must navigate manually." "This is unacceptable." A senior military commander stepped forward. "High Arbiter, I must be honest with you. I have served in the fleet for 150 years. I have never seen anything like this. The humans have not merely attacked our communications. They have taken complete control of our information infrastructure. We are blind, deaf, and mute. We cannot fight an enemy we cannot find, and we cannot coordinate a defense when we cannot communicate." Zethkal slammed his fist on the table. "You're telling me that the mighty Galactic Council, with 4 million warships and 800 member species, is helpless against a single young race?" "I am telling you that we underestimated them," the commander replied quietly. "We assumed they were what they appeared to be. We never considered that they might be hiding their true capabilities." The countdown timer continued its relentless march. 46 hours, 45 hours, 44 hours. Representatives from across the galaxy arrived at Nexus Prime by whatever means they could manage. Some came by personal ship. Others hitched rides on cargo vessels. They gathered in the Grand Chamber and demanded answers that nobody could provide. What are the humans planning? Where is their fleet? Why can't we stop this? The questions echoed through the chamber, but no answers came. The mighty Galactic Council, ruler of known space for 12,000 years, sat in confusion and fear, while a countdown timer marked the approach of something unknown. High Arbiter Zethkal stood before the assembled representatives and tried to project confidence. "We will survive this," he declared. "Whatever the humans are planning, we will endure it. Our civilization is ancient and strong. We have faced challenges before." But even as he spoke, he could see that few believed him. The representatives had heard the reports. They knew that the Council's power had been built on technology and military strength, and both had been neutralized by an enemy they could not even locate. On the main display, the countdown timer showed 36 hours remaining. Representative Yenny of the Solareth Union rose to speak. "I warned you," she said, her voice filled with bitter anger. "I told you that threatening humanity was a mistake. I told you that they were not what they seemed, but you wouldn't listen. You were so certain of your superiority that you couldn't imagine a young species being more advanced than you." "Enough," Zethkal shouted. "Assigning blame accomplishes nothing. We must focus on survival." "Survival?" Yenny laughed without humor. "Look at that timer. Look at our paralyzed fleet. Look at our useless communications. We are not going to survive this, Zethkal. We are going to learn too late what happens when you threaten the wrong species." The chamber fell silent. The countdown timer continued its march toward zero. 30 hours, 24 hours, 18 hours. Some representatives tried to flee Nexus Prime, but they found that the station's departure corridors had been locked down by unknown means. They were trapped, forced to wait for whatever was coming. Others spent their remaining time contacting their families through personal couriers, saying goodbye just as Ambassador Vance had suggested. Some prayed to their gods. Some simply sat in silence and watched the timer. 12 hours, 6 hours, 3 hours. Zethkal stood alone in his office, watching the countdown approach zero. He had ruled the Galactic Council for 80 years. He had believed himself the most powerful being in known space. Now he understood that he had never had any power at all. He had merely been allowed to believe he did by an enemy who was playing a much longer game. 1 hour, 30 minutes, 10 minutes. The Grand Chamber was packed with representatives who had gathered to witness whatever was about to happen. The countdown timer dominated the main display, its numbers growing smaller with each passing second. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Zethkal took his place at the central podium. If these were his final moments, he would face them with dignity. 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. The chamber was completely silent. Every being present held their breath. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 0. For one long moment, nothing happened. The timer simply disappeared from the display, replaced by a blank screen. Representatives looked at each other in confusion. Then Zethkal's personal communication device activated. A voice spoke through it, a human voice. "Hi, Arbiter Zethkal. Please check your fleet status." With trembling hands, Zethkal accessed his military displays. What he saw made his blood freeze. The combined galactic fleet, all 4 million ships, had vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled. Simply gone. "What have you done?" he whispered. The voice replied calmly. "We have responded to your ultimatum. Ambassador Vance will arrive shortly to explain your options. I suggest you listen carefully." The communication ended. Zethkal stood at the podium, staring at empty displays where his mighty fleet had been just moments before. The humans had not fired a single weapon. They had not killed a single being. They had simply made the entire military power of the Galactic Council disappear, and now they were coming to collect their victory. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the observation deck of the carrier Silent Vigil and watched Earth rotate slowly below. The blue oceans and green continents looked peaceful from this height. It was hard to believe that this small world had just brought the most powerful political body in the galaxy to its knees. He was a man in his late 60s with gray hair and a face marked by decades of military service. He had commanded human forces for 30 years, but only a handful of people knew the true extent of what he commanded. "Admiral, the operation was successful," his executive officer reported. "All 4 million Council vessels have been displaced to Holding Zone Alpha. No casualties on either side." Chen nodded slowly. "What about their ground forces? Their orbital stations?" "Every military installation belonging to Council species has been neutralized. Weapon systems are offline. Defense platforms have been disabled. They cannot mount any resistance." "Good. Make sure our ships maintain presence throughout their space. I want them to understand that we can reach anywhere, at any time." The executive officer saluted and returned to his duties. Chen remained on the observation deck, thinking about the long road that had led to this moment. It had started 43 years ago, when humanity first made contact with alien life. The Galactic Council had welcomed them with open arms and friendly words, but human intelligence agencies had quickly discovered the truth behind those words. The Council did not see humanity as equals. They saw them as useful servants at best, potential threats at worst. Dozens of young species had been absorbed into the Council over the millennia, their cultures erased, their independence stripped away. The pattern was always the same. Welcome the newcomers, study their capabilities, then find an excuse to bring them under control. Humanity had recognized this pattern within the first decade of contact, and they had begun preparing. The fleet that the Council knew about, the 50,000 ships that human propaganda had allowed them to see, was nothing but a decoy. The real fleet had been built in secret, in hidden shipyards located in deep space, in asteroid fields, in places that no alien sensor could detect. Chen had overseen the construction himself. 300,000 warships, each one incorporating technology that would have seemed like magic to the Council species. Faster engines, stronger shields, weapons that could disable entire fleets without firing a shot. And the crown jewel of human engineering, the displacement drive. Human scientists had discovered something that no other species had ever found. They had learned how to fold space itself, to move objects from one location to another instantaneously. The Council ships had not been destroyed. They had simply been moved to a pocket dimension that human engineers had created specifically for this purpose. 4 million warships, trapped in a space that had not existed until humanity needed it to exist. Chen's communication device activated. "Admiral, Ambassador Vance is requesting a briefing before she returns to Nexus Prime." "Patch her through." Ambassador Vance's face appeared on his personal display. She looked tired but triumphant. "Admiral Chen, I understand the operation was successful." "Completely successful, Ambassador. The Council has no military capability remaining. They are at our mercy." Vance nodded. What about casualties? Zero on both sides. We captured their ships without harming anyone aboard. They're currently in stasis in the holding dimension, perfectly safe, but completely neutralized. Good. Earth's government was very clear about that point. We are not murderers. We are not conquerors. We are simply people who refuse to be conquered ourselves. Chen understood this philosophy. It was the same philosophy that had guided human military planning for 4 decades. Humanity would not start wars. They would not commit genocide. They would not become the monsters that history had shown them they could be. But they would also never allow themselves to be dominated by anyone. Not ever again. Ambassador, what are your orders for the next phase? Chen asked. I'm returning to Nexus Prime to present our terms. The Council will either accept them or they will face the consequences. And what exactly are those consequences? Vance's expression hardened. If they refuse to cooperate, we will make their leadership disappear just as we made their fleet disappear. We will continue removing anyone who threatens humanity until there is no one left who is willing to try. Chen nodded. This was the plan that Earth's government had approved. Not conquest, but neutralization. Not empire, but enforced peace. I'll have a ship ready to escort you, he said. Be careful, Ambassador. Desperate people do desperate things. I know, but I don't think they'll try anything. They've just watched their entire military vanish without a trace. They're not feeling desperate right now. They're feeling terrified. The communication ended and Chen turned back to watching Earth. Somewhere down there, 50 billion humans were going about their daily lives, most of them unaware of what had just happened. They would learn soon enough. The news would spread, and humanity would have to decide what kind of civilization they wanted to be. The Council had forced this confrontation. They had threatened humanity's existence. They had demanded surrender. Now they would face the response. A young officer approached Chen with a data tablet. Admiral, we're receiving requests for information from Council representatives. They want to know what happened to their ships and their personnel. Tell them that Ambassador Vance will explain everything when she arrives at Nexus Prime. Until then, they should focus on remaining calm and not doing anything foolish. Yes, sir, the officer hesitated. Admiral, there's also a message from the Solarith delegation. Representative Yenny is asking to speak with you directly. Chen considered this. The Solarith had been humanity's allies, or at least their friends, throughout the decades of tension with the Council. They had voted against the ultimatum. They deserved consideration. Put her through. Representative Yenny's image appeared on his display. Her large eyes held a mixture of relief and concern. Admiral Chen, I must say your species continues to surprise me. I hope not in a bad way, Representative. That depends on what happens next. You have just demonstrated power beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen. The question is, what will you do with it? Chen chose his words carefully. We will do what humanity has always tried to do, Representative. We will protect ourselves and our friends. We will stop those who would harm the innocent. We will not seek empire or conquest. Those are noble words. I have heard noble words from powerful beings before. They are rarely followed by noble actions. I understand your skepticism. All I can say is that humanity remembers its history. We remember what happens when power is used without restraint. We will not repeat those mistakes. Yenny was silent for a moment. Then she said, I believe you, Admiral. I don't know why, but I do. Perhaps because your species has had the power to destroy the Council for years, and instead you waited. You gave them every chance to avoid this confrontation. We hoped it would never come to this, Chen admitted. We built our secret fleet as insurance, not as a weapon of aggression. We always hoped that the Council would accept humanity as equals, and that we would never need to reveal what we could do. But they couldn't accept you as equals. They were too afraid of what you might become. And now they will see what we actually are. I hope that is less frightening than what they imagined. Yenny's expression softened slightly. So do I, Admiral. For all our sakes. The communication ended, and Chen returned to his duties. There was still much work to be done. Human ships needed to be positioned throughout Council space. Communication networks needed to be restored under human supervision. And the governments of 800 species needed to be informed that the old order was finished. Some would accept this peacefully, Others would resist, but the outcome was not in doubt. Humanity had prepared for this moment for 40 years, and they had prepared well. In the displacement dimension, 4 million ships floated in stasis. Their crews slept peacefully, unaware of their situation. When the time was right, they would be returned to normal space, but only after their governments had agreed to new terms. Only after the threat to humanity had been permanently removed. Admiral Chen looked at Earth one more time, then turned and walked to the command center. Ambassador Vance would be arriving at Nexus Prime soon. The next phase of the operation was about to begin. Humanity had never wanted to rule the galaxy. They had simply wanted to live in peace, to explore the stars, to build their civilization without interference. The Galactic Council had denied them that peace. They had demanded humanity's submission. They had threatened humanity's destruction. Now they would learn the price of that threat. The silent Vigil's engines came to life, and the massive ship began moving toward the jump point. Around it, hundreds of other human vessels fell into formation. The fleet that the galaxy had never known existed was revealing itself at last, and the galaxy would never be the same. Chen sat in his command chair and watched the stars blur as the ship entered faster than light travel. In a few hours, he would be at Nexus Prime. In a few hours, the final negotiations would begin. He hoped the Council would be wise enough to accept humanity's terms. He hoped there would be no need for further demonstrations of human power. But if they weren't wise, if they insisted on resistance, humanity was ready for that too. They had been ready for 40 years. And they would remain ready for as long as necessary. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 800 representatives sat in stunned silence, staring at empty displays that had once shown the position of their combined military forces. 4 million ships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, gone without a trace. High Arbiter Zeth Kal stood at the central podium, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. For the first time in his 80 years of political leadership, he had no words. He had no plan. He had nothing but the growing certainty that he had made a terrible mistake. "High Arbiter," one of his advisors whispered urgently. "We're detecting a ship approaching the station. It's human." Zethkal looked at the tactical display. A single human vessel was descending through their defense perimeter, or what had been their defense perimeter. The orbital weapons platforms were silent. The defensive shields were offline. Nothing stood between Nexus Prime and the approaching ship. "Can we stop them?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "No, sir. We have no functioning weapons, no operational defenses. They can go wherever they want." The human ship entered the station's atmosphere and descended toward the Grand Chamber. It landed smoothly in the central plaza, its engines barely making a sound. The craft was smaller than Zethkal had expected. It was a diplomatic shuttle, not a warship. The main doors of the Grand Chamber opened, and Ambassador Helena Vance walked in. She was accompanied by 4 human soldiers in light armor, but they carried no visible weapons. They didn't need weapons? Everyone in the chamber understood that now. Vance walked calmly through the rows of terrified representatives, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She climbed the steps to the central podium and stopped directly in front of Zethkal. "High Arbiter," she said politely, "I believe you have questions." Zethkal found his voice with difficulty. "Where is our fleet? Where are our people?" "Safe," Vance replied. "Every ship, every crew member, every soldier. They are all alive and unharmed. They have been moved to a secure location where they will remain until this matter is resolved." "What matter? What do you want?" Vance turned to address the entire chamber. Her voice was calm but carried clearly to every corner of the massive room. 3 days ago, this council issued an ultimatum to humanity. You demanded that we surrender our fleet, halt our expansion, and accept supervised development status for 500 years. You gave us 30 days to comply. You threatened us with military force if we refused. She paused, letting her words sink in. We have decided not to comply. Instead, we have taken steps to ensure that the threat you made can never be carried out. Your military forces have been neutralized. Your weapon systems have been disabled. Your ability to harm humanity no longer exists. A wave of frightened murmuring swept through the chamber. Vance waited for it to subside before continuing. You have two options. The first option is cooperation. You will formally dissolve the Galactic Council in its current form. You will transfer governmental authority to a transitional body that will operate under human supervision. You will sign binding treaties that prohibit military aggression against any species. In return, your people will be protected. Your ships will be returned. Your civilizations will be allowed to continue and even prosper. And the second option? Zethkal asked hoarsely. The second option is resistance. If you choose this path, we will remove every individual who poses a threat to humanity's safety. We will continue removing them until there is no one left who is willing to threaten us. Your ships will remain in detention. Your governments will collapse. Your civilizations will fall into chaos. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Representatives who had been silent moments before now jumped to their feet, demanding that Vance be arrested, that humanity be punished, that someone do something. Vance stood calmly and let them rage. When the noise began to die down, she spoke again. I understand your anger. You have been powerful for 12,000 years. You have ruled this galaxy according to your wishes. You have decided the fates of countless species, and now a young race has taken that power from you in a matter of hours. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of one representative after another. But consider this. We could have destroyed you. We could have reduced your homeworlds to ash. We could have wiped your species from existence. Instead, we chose to give you a chance to survive. We chose mercy when we had every right to choose revenge. High Arbiter Zethkal felt the weight of 800 stares pressing down on him. He was the one who had proposed the ultimatum. He was the one who had started this disaster. Now everyone was waiting to see what he would do. How much time do we have to decide, as he asked? 30 seconds, Vance replied. The same courtesy you gave me when I asked to speak in my own defense. The chamber fell silent again. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to decide the fate of 800 civilizations. 30 seconds to choose between submission and destruction. Zethkal looked at his fellow council members. Some nodded at him to accept. Others shook their heads in furious denial. Most simply stared blankly, unable to process what was happening. We need more time, Zethkal said. Surely you can give us more time to consider such an important decision. 20 seconds, Vance replied without expression. This is madness. You cannot expect us to surrender our entire civilization in half a minute. 15 seconds. The same madness you showed when you voted to threaten humanity without even allowing us to speak in our defense. Zethkal opened his mouth to argue further and vanished. One moment he was standing at the podium, and the next moment he was simply gone. No flash of light, no sound. He had been there, and then he wasn't. The chamber exploded in panic. Representatives screamed and tried to flee, but the doors would not open. They pressed against each other, searching for exits that did not exist. Vance remained perfectly calm. The High Arbiter chose resistance. He has been removed. Would anyone else like to make the same choice? One by one, the representatives who had voted in favor of the ultimatum began disappearing. The Varathi delegation vanished entirely. The Molthari representatives were gone in seconds. Species after species lost their leaders to the invisible force that was removing them from the chamber. Within 2 minutes, 173 representatives had disappeared. The ones who remained were those who had voted against the ultimatum or who had remained silent during the debate. Vance addressed the survivors. The individuals who threatened humanity have been removed. They are alive, but they will not be returning. They have been relocated to a world where they can live out their lives in comfort, but they will never hold power again. Representative Yenny of the Solarith Union stood on shaking legs. Ambassador Vance, what happens now? Vance's expression softened slightly. Now we begin the work of building something better. The Galactic Council was built on fear and domination. The strong controlled the weak. The many oppressed the few. That system is finished. She looked around the chamber at the frightened, confused beings who remained. Humanity does not want to rule you. We do not want to control your governments or dictate your cultures. We simply want to ensure that no one threatens anyone ever again. But how? Another representative asked. How can you guarantee peace? By making war impossible. Your military forces will be reduced to levels sufficient for defense only. Weapons capable of planetary destruction will be eliminated. Any species that attempts to build aggressive military capability will be stopped before they can threaten anyone. You're making yourselves the police of the entire galaxy, Yenny observed quietly. Yes, Vance admitted. It's a burden we never wanted, but someone must bear it. And humanity has proven that we can be trusted with power. We had the ability to destroy you, and we chose not to. We had the opportunity for revenge, and we chose mercy instead. The surviving representatives looked at each other. Some showed resignation, others showed something that might have been hope. For thousands of years they had lived under the Council's rule, which often meant living under the Varathi's rule. Perhaps human rule would be different, or perhaps it wouldn't. Only time would tell. Vance descended from the podium and walked toward the exit. A transitional government will be established within the week. Representatives from each species will be invited to participate. Those who work with us will find humanity to be generous partners. Those who work against us will share the fate of the former council leadership. She paused at the door and looked back. The choice is yours. We hope you choose wisely. The doors opened, and Ambassador Vance walked out of the Grand Chamber. Her guards followed close behind. The doors closed again, leaving the remaining representatives alone with their thoughts. The Galactic Council, as it had existed for 12,000 years, was finished. Its leadership was gone. Its military was captured. Its power was broken. And humanity, the young species that everyone had dismissed and threatened and underestimated, was now the most powerful force in the galaxy. Representative Yenny sank into her seat and stared at the empty podium. I told them, she whispered to no one in particular, I told them not to threaten the humans. Around her, the remaining representatives began the long process of accepting their new reality. Some wept. Some sat in stunned silence. A few began talking quietly about how to work with their new human overlords. Outside the chamber, human ships floated in silent formation around Nexus Prime. Their presence was a reminder that the old order was dead and a new order had begun. The galaxy would never be the same again. And somewhere in a distant pocket dimension, 4 million ships waited in darkness for the day when they might be allowed to return home. That day would come, but only when humanity decided it was safe, only when the threat was truly over, only when peace was finally guaranteed. 6 months had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. The station world of Nexus Prime still floated at the center of known space, but its purpose had been transformed. Where once the Grand Chamber had held representatives who voted on how to control younger species, it now held delegates who discussed how to help them grow. Ambassador Helena Vance stood before the assembled representatives and delivered her monthly report. She had been appointed interim administrator by Earth's government, a position she had accepted with reluctance and fulfilled with dedication. Trade has increased by 47% across all sectors, she announced. Without the Council's restrictive tariffs and protected markets, goods are flowing freely between the systems for the first time in millennia. The representatives listened attentively. Many of them had been skeptical of human leadership at first, expecting the same kind of domination they had experienced under the Varathi. What they had found instead was something different. Humanity had not replaced one empire with another. They had simply removed the mechanisms of oppression and allowed the galaxy to rebuild itself. The military reduction program is proceeding ahead of schedule, Vance continued. 93% of member species have completed the transition to defensive-only forces. Their excess warships have been decommissioned and recycled into civilian vessels. Representative Yenny raised her hand. Over the past 6 months, she had emerged as one of the key figures in the new order. Her early support for humanity had given her credibility, and her genuine concern for peaceful cooperation had earned her respect. What about the displaced fleets? She asked. When will they be returned? Vance nodded at the question. The process of returning the combined fleet is continuing. So far, 2 million vessels have been released from the holding dimension and returned to their home systems. The remaining ships will be returned over the next year, as their governments complete the required treaty obligations. And the crews? Another representative asked. Are they truly unharmed? Every single crew member has been returned safely, Vance confirmed. They were kept in stasis during their displacement and have no memory of the experience. As far as they know, they simply went to sleep and woke up several months later. This had been one of humanity's most important decisions. They could have kept the captured crews as hostages. They could have used them as leverage. Instead, they had returned them as quickly as possible, asking nothing in exchange except compliance with the new peace treaties. The representatives had expected conquest. They had received guardianship. On a dozen worlds, the effects of the new order were already visible. Species that had been oppressed by council hegemons for centuries were experiencing freedom for the first time. Trade restrictions that had kept developing worlds poor had been lifted. Military occupations that had crushed resistance movements had been ended. On the planet Varath, where the Varathi had maintained their harshest colonial presence, the native Varathi people were rebuilding their culture. For 3,000 years, they had been forbidden to speak their own language or practice their traditional arts. Now, with the Varathi leadership removed, they were rediscovering who they had been before the conquest. Human advisors worked alongside local leaders, helping them establish stable governments without imposing human values or systems. The goal was not to create human puppets, but to create independent societies capable of governing themselves. On the border worlds where piracy had flourished for generations, human patrol ships maintained order. They did not conquer the pirates or destroy their bases. They simply made it impossible for raiders to attack civilian traffic. The pirates, finding their profession unprofitable, gradually turned to legitimate trade. The galaxy was becoming something it had never been, genuinely peaceful. But not everyone was happy with the new arrangement. In the hidden corners of former council space, resistance movements were forming. Former military commanders who had lost their power, former politicians who had lost their influence, former aristocrats who had lost their privilege. They gathered in secret and plotted ways to overthrow humanity's guardianship. Human intelligence was aware of these movements. Human technology made it nearly impossible to keep secrets. But instead of crushing the resistance with overwhelming force, humanity chose a different approach. They waited, they watched, and they gave the resistors every opportunity to give up their plans peacefully. Most of them did. When they realized that their communications were compromised, their meetings were monitored, and their weapons caches were known to human authorities, they lost the will to fight. One by one, they emerged from hiding and accepted the new reality. The few who persisted were dealt with quietly. They vanished from their beds one night and woke up on the same exile world where the former council leadership now lived. There, they could complain about humanity as much as they wanted. They simply couldn't do anything about it. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the observation deck of the Silent Vigil, now stationed permanently at Nexus Prime. He watched ships from 100 different species come and go, trading freely without fear of pirates or military threats. "It's strange," he said to his executive officer. "We spent 40 years preparing for war. Now we spend our days keeping the peace." "Is that a complaint, Admiral?" Chen shook his head. "No. This is exactly what we hoped for. We just never expected it to actually happen." The executive officer smiled. "The council thought they could threaten us into submission. They didn't understand what they were dealing with." "They understood power," Chen replied. "They just didn't understand restraint. They couldn't imagine a species that would build the most powerful military force in history and then refuse to use it for conquest. This had been humanity's greatest weapon all along. Not their technology, not their ships, not their ability to fold space and capture entire fleets without firing a shot. Their greatest weapon was their choice not to become the thing they had fought against. History was full of examples of oppressed peoples becoming oppressors themselves. Humanity had studied that history carefully. They had seen the patterns. They had understood the temptations. And they had decided collectively and deliberately to be different. On Earth, children were now learning about the events of 6 months ago in their schools. They learned how humanity had been threatened by a galactic government that saw them as a danger. They learned how humanity had responded with overwhelming force but deliberate mercy. They learned that power without restraint was tyranny, and that true strength lay in the ability to choose peace when war was possible. These children would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was respected rather than feared. They would inherit a civilization that had earned its place among the stars not through conquest, but through the careful and compassionate use of power. Ambassador Vance concluded her report to the assembled representatives and opened the floor for discussion. The topics ranged from trade agreements to cultural exchanges to the ongoing process of military reduction. It was mundane work, the kind of work that built civilizations rather than destroyed them. When the session ended, Yenny approached Vance privately. Ambassador, I have to admit something to you. Yes? When your species first arrived in the galaxy, I was one of those who argued for giving you a chance. But I never expected this. I never imagined that humanity would actually be good. Vance smiled sadly. We're not good, Representative. We're just trying to be better than we used to be. Human history is full of terrible things. Wars, genocides, oppressions of every kind. We've done everything to each other that the Council species have done. Then how did you become this? We learned, slowly, painfully, over thousands of years. We learned that the cycles of violence never end unless someone chooses to end them. We learned that power used only for domination eventually destroys the powerful as well as the powerless. We learned that the only way to build something lasting is to build it together. Yenny considered this. Do you think the other species can learn the same lessons? I think they already are, Vance replied. Look at what's happening across the galaxy. Freed peoples are choosing reconciliation over revenge. Former enemies are becoming trading partners. Walls that stood for millennia are coming down. She gestured toward the viewport, where a Varathi trading ship was docking peacefully alongside a Varathi vessel. 6 months ago, such a sight would have been impossible. The Varathi had ruled the Varathi with an iron fist. Now they were learning to coexist as equals. Change takes time, Vance continued, but it's possible. We're proof of that. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system. Ambassador Vance, we're detecting a fleet entering the system. Identification shows them as the last batch of released Council vessels, returning home. Vance looked out at the stars and watched as dozens of ships appeared from faster-than-light travel. These were the final vessels being returned from the holding dimension. Their crews would wake from stasis and find themselves in a galaxy that no longer belonged to the Council. Some would be angry, some would be confused, some would be relieved. All of them would have to adapt to the new reality. Humanity had not set out to rule the galaxy. They had simply refused to be ruled themselves. In doing so, they had created something unprecedented, a galactic order based on protection rather than domination, on guardianship rather than empire. It was not a perfect system. Nothing built by mortal beings ever was. But it was better than what had come before, and with time and effort, it could become better still. Vance turned away from the viewport and headed back to her office. There was work to be done, trade agreements to negotiate, disputes to mediate, civilizations to help rebuild. The burden of power was heavy, but humanity had accepted it willingly, knowing that the alternative was a galaxy ruled by fear and force. They had chosen to be guardians rather than conquerors. And the galaxy, slowly and uncertainly, was beginning to heal. In schools across human space, children looked up at the stars and dreamed of peaceful exploration. On worlds that had known only oppression, people walked freely for the first time in generations. In the halls of Nexus Prime, representatives from hundreds of species worked together to build a future they could all share. The Galactic Council had been erased. In its place, something new was growing, something that might, given enough time and care, become something truly good. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity's fleet kept watch. Not as conquerors, not as oppressors, but as guardians, standing ready to protect a galaxy that was finally learning to live in peace.